Today we're going to be looking at the last method of solving quadratic equations, which is using the quadratic formula. Now, if you want to memorize this, and it's very helpful if you memorize it, it actually helps. Brain research tells us that if we say it and write it 7 times, it will help us. So if you want to get a piece of paper and a pencil, I'm actually going to sing through this little jingle 7 times, and we're going to practice writing it, all in an attempt to memorize it. So it is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Try again. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. A little monotonous, but hopefully you memorized it. Now, in order to use this, we have to have the quadratic equation written in standard form. Once it's in standard form, you can identify the a, b, and c terms. So in this quadratic equation, the a term is 2, the b term is 3, and the c term is negative 5. Now, as I sing the song to myself, I'm going to plug in the numbers. X equals negative b. That means the opposite of the b term. Since it's a positive 3, I'm going to write a negative 3. If it was a negative 3, I would want the opposite of that, which would be a positive 3. So just one word about plugging this first number. Always take the opposite of the b. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So as I sang the song, I plugged in the number that went with that variable. Now, at this point, you have 3 parts that you want to evaluate. You can do all 3 in the same step. You want to do the squaring. You want to multiply the negative 4 times the a times the c. And you want to do the 2 times a at the bottom. So we're going to do all 3 of these in one step. So when we do it, 3 squared is 9. Negative 4 times 2 times negative 5 is a positive 40. And 2 times 2 is 4. So you can see that I evaluated all 3 of them right here. Now at this point, you want to evaluate the radical sign. And we know that 40 plus 9 is 49. Remember, when taking the square root of a number, we know that the square root of 49 is 7. It could be a positive 7 or a negative 7. That's why we say plus or minus the square root to remind us that it could be a positive or a negative. So now we have to set up 2 equations, one with a positive 7, one with a negative 7. So the first one would be negative 3 plus a positive 7 divided by 4. And we would have a negative 3 minus 7 divided by 4. When evaluating this, this would be 4 divided by 4, which is 1. That's one of our solutions. This would be negative 10 divided by 4, which when simplified could either be negative 5/2 or a negative 2.5. So there are our 2 solutions, the 2 places it would cross the x-axis if we were to graph it. Okay, another practice. First, we identify the a term as 5. The b term is negative 17, and the c term is 6. And we sing the song, x equals negative b. This was negative, so we have to do the opposite, which is a positive 17. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So I plugged in my numbers as I sang the song. So now I remember I have 3 parts that I want to solve. I want to do the squaring. I want to do the negative 4 times 5 times 6. And I want to do the 2 times 5. So negative 17 times negative 17 is 289. Negative 4 times 5 times 6 is 120, a negative 120. And then 2 times 5 is 10. So I evaluated those 3 parts. Now I want to figure out what's underneath the radical sign. And 289 minus 120 is 169, which happens to be a perfect square, which is 13. So we have plus or minus 13. So we're going to set up 2 equations, one with a positive 13, one with a negative 13. So that would be 17 plus a positive 13 divided by 10, which when evaluating would be 30 divided by 10, which is 3. And we have 17 minus 13, which is 4/10, which you could write as a decimal or as a simplified fraction. So our answers are 3 or 2/5 or 4/10 as a decimal. Now, there's something called the discriminant that you need to know about, and that is we always want to know, is there going to be a solution? Is there going to be 2 solutions, 0 solutions, or 1 solution? Remember, when the parabola hits the x-axis twice, there are 2 solutions. When the vertex of the parabola hits the x-axis, there's going to be 1 solution. And if the parabola never crosses or touches the x-axis, there are 0 solutions. You can figure this out without having to go through the entire, all you have to do is think about, remember this was the radical sign, b squared minus 4ac. If you just take the part that's under the radical sign and you plug in the numbers, we can figure out how many solutions there would be. So here we have an equation. The a is equal to 3, the b is equal to 10, and the c is equal to 2. We just want to know if there's going to be a solution or not, or if there's 1 or 2 solutions. So let's plug this into b squared minus 4ac. b is 10, so we have 10 squared minus 4 times a times c. That would be 100 minus 24. Now at this point, knowing what 100 minus 24 isn't important. What I do know is that it is going to be a positive number. If the number is positive, which means it's greater than 0, we know that there are going to be 2 solutions. So at this point, I know it's positive, because remember this was under a square root sign. You can take the square root of a positive number. So since we can take the square root of that, there's going to be 2 solutions. This particular one, we have a is equal to 9, b is equal to negative 6, and c is equal to 1. So b squared would be negative 6 squared times 4 times a times c. This one is actually 36 minus 36. Well, we know that that is 0. Okay? So now we know, because the answer is 0, that the vertex is going to be on the x-axis, and there's going to be 1 solution. On this one, a is equal to 1, b is equal to 1, and c is equal to 1. So we plug in the numbers, 1 squared minus 4 times a times c. We would have 1 minus 4. Right here, we notice that the answer is going to be negative, a negative 3. We cannot take the square root of a negative number. Therefore, we know that there are going to be no solutions. There are 0 solutions to this. So anytime you're working through a quadratic equation, when you get to that square, the radical sign here, and you evaluate this and it's negative, you know that there's not going to be a solution. If it equals 0, you know there's going to be 1 solution, and you continue working. So let's practice a couple here. So here we have a is equal to 2, b is equal to 7, and c is equal to 6. So as I sing the song, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, remember we want to now evaluate 3 parts, these 3 parts. So we have x is equal to negative 7 plus or minus the square root. 7 squared is 49. And 4 times 2 times 6, 24 is, let's see here, 48. That's 48. And then 2 times 2 is 4. Well, we know that the square root or 49 minus 48 is 1, and the square root of 1 is 1. So we have plus 1 or minus 1, and we are ready to set up our two equations. In the first one, x is negative 7 plus 1 divided by 4. The next one would be negative 7 minus 1 divided by 4. So this would be negative 6/4, which simplifies down to negative 1/2, or 1 5/10. This would be negative 8 divided by 4, which simplifies to 2. So our two solutions would be 2 and negative 1.5. Let's look at one more example. So here our A term is equal to 5, our B term is equal to negative 11, and our C term is equal to negative 12. So x equals negative b, or the opposite of b would be 11, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. Okay, so we have the three parts that we want to evaluate. So x is equal to 11 plus or minus the square root. Negative 11 times negative 11 is 121. And negative 4 times 5 times negative 12 is 240. So now that's all divided by 10, because 2 times 5 is 10. So we have x is equal to 11 plus or minus. This equals 361, and that is actually a perfect square, which is 19. So it's going to be plus or minus 19 divided by 10. So we have x is equal to 11 plus 19 divided by 10. And we have x is equal to 11 minus 19 divided by 10. This one would be 30 divided by 10, which is 3. This one would be negative 8/10, or we could write it as a decimal, negative 8/10. And there's our two solutions. I hope this helps you with solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula.